In this presentation, I will be talking about youth group working as a microculture. I'll be discussing the values and beliefs, the characteristics, and the behaviors which fit Catholic or Christian youth group working into the context of a microculture. So to begin, I'm going to talk about the values. So to start, I'll just say that whenever I say youth group working, you can assume that I mean Catholic or Christian. I know that there are other youth groups out there of other denominations, but for the sake of this video and shortness of words, I'm going to stick to the meaning of Catholic or Christian. So the first value of a youth group worker is that we do believe in Catholic and Christian beliefs. So we do follow the church in the work that we do with high school students. So our main outreach is to high school students, and I'll be discussing a little bit of what we do later on, but the main premise of what we follow is in accordance with Catholic and Christian belief. The nature of it is to engage kids in conversation and engage them in a personal relationship with God, and so that wouldn't make much sense if we ourselves didn't believe in God and didn't follow the practices of the Catholic or Christian church. Another value or belief you could say is that we believe that we can really get kids to encounter Christ through encountering the youth group workers and other people who are believers in Christ. So in trying to build up that relationship with God, you need support. Like, you can't do it on your own, sort of a thing. Or at least it's a lot harder. And so we believe that just being there with them, being a part of their lives, just being invested in who they are and caring about them, that's a huge way that we want this outreach to work, just relationally. We just want to, be a support for them as they grow in their faith. And another value would be togetherness. So as a youth group worker, you focus primarily on keeping the group together. So our group is high schoolers, and so we focus ourselves in a particular school or in a particular town or church. That's how it's usually done, and we really invest in these kids. We invest in being together as a group, something called large groups and small groups, which I'll describe. And we just do a bunch of crazy activities together, have talks together, and meet every Thursday night. And that's how we instigate our togetherness and try to keep the group just, in a way that they know that we care about them and they know that we are invested in their lives. As for characteristics, you must be out of high school, and that's a requirement. It wouldn't really work if you're in high school and you're trying to get your teens and your peers to do something that you're asking of them, because they're like, oh, you're my friend. So that wouldn't work out so well. So because of that, we don't allow high school students to be on the leadership team. Typically the age of the youth group workers are 19 to 30, although that's not set in stone. We actually do have some youth group workers in my group that are the age of like 50 and above. But it's just the nature of the work, and make it a little bit harder for someone who's older because it's so high-paced and very energetic. You have to be on your toes all the time, so it's just a little bit harder if you are older. But they're not completely excluded. It just tends to be within the ages of 19 to 30, around those. Another thing is that leaders have to be practicing in some form of Christianity. So as we are trying to outreach to others, we need to be nourished ourselves. You can't expect to be on your A game and be able to help kids with these tough questions of faith and morality if you're not brushed up on them and if you don't know them really well yourself. And so that is why they ask us, to build our relationship with God so that we're able to help these kids in high school build theirs as well. Another thing is that leaders follow a set of rules. So we have some things that we've agreed to in becoming a youth group worker. So no matter what youth group we belong to, every youth group has a day. So our day, my youth group is called Ignite. So Ignite meets on Thursdays. And so they've asked us to actually set apart Thursday so that we can actually work on these relationships and be there for these high school students who we are outreaching to. If you're not able to be there, it just makes sense that you wouldn't be as close to them. So we are asked to set those days apart. And also days for retreats and different other service events and stuff like that. They ask us to try and take off when we can for those events. As for behaviors, So one definite behavior of a youth group worker is enthusiasm. You have to have a lot of energy and a lot of enthusiasm to engage the students, because they're not going to really pay attention to you if you're super boring, and you want to spread the love of God to them. And one of the best ways to do that is just being on their level, high energy, like a high schooler. You want to be very enthusiastic and spread the joy of the faith. That's one big part of it. Another aspect is definitely selflessness. You have to be selfless. Sometimes it's very hard. We don't get paid. It's volunteer work. So to give up your Thursday can sometimes not be the most enticing activity. But selflessness is a real it's a real part of being a youth group worker, because you know that in the end you are helping these kids get closer to God in one way or another, and that that is the reward in itself. And so selflessness is required. And then lastly, for behaviors would be just a desire to follow God. If you don't have your heart in a place that says, I do want to serve God and I do want to serve Him in this way, it's really probably not the place for you. And lastly for that is the use of language. So when I say small group or large group, as I said previously, so within the context of our microculture, when we hear large group, we know that means all the members of Ignite, my youth group, would know that means we're all getting together. Every member of Ignite will be there that night. We're going to have food, we're going to have activities, we are going to get some talks or do something really cool. And that's large group. And then small group is is at a separate location, and it's where we break off into classes and into, the guys get with one group and the girls get with another within their class and grade. And they, talk about more personal things, like how the talk affected them, what's going on in their lives, if God's been doing something, saying something to them. So that's what you would discuss in a small group. Prevalence, so there's, within the youth group community, it's actually international. Kairos, which is one of the overarching groups sort of the youth group that I belong to, it's an ecumenical group, which means it's like denominations of Christianity. It was created to encounter young men and women and to introduce them to Christ and to call them on in their faith journey. So that's what Kairos is. And they have branches, 23 within the U.S., and then they have branches all over the world. They have places in Syria, in Ireland, Scotland, Belgium, all over the place. And there's lots of youth groups happening there as well. So youth groups are actually way more far spread than people might believe. And the term started around the 1940s by a Protestant pastor actually, and it's only grown since then. So the concept of a youth group began around the 1940s and has really expanded and taken off since then. So 5 interesting facts about youth groups. The first would be the Yes Retreat. So as you see these shirts behind me, they both have come from Yes Retreats, and including the one that I have on. The Yes Retreat is basically run by Kairos, that group I was just talking about. And in the U.S., we meet in Michigan every year, and internationally, usually within Europe, they meet in some European country, and anyone from, not the U.S. can attend those. And it's basically just a massive retreat. Hundreds of high school students, many youth group workers go as well. And what we do is just, they hear lots of talks, get lots of information, hear lots of information about the faith and what it is, and, different people, how they've experienced it. And it's just a very cool retreat to go on. Happens every single year. The second interesting fact is that Six Flags actually puts on a youth group event every year as well. So they sponsor a bunch of youth groups to go out, or they give them a cut on their admission tickets, and they hold a conference there. So they have a speaker, they usually have people who give skits, do live music, really cool stuff like that, and they invite youth groups from all over the place. All youth groups from the U.S. are welcome. And so you get tons of different people, lots of diversity there. Some people from like Kentucky I met last year, they come from all over the place. And and then there's, free food for lunch. It usually ends with either a mass or a concert. Super cool stuff. A third interesting fact is that youth groups provide opportunities to go on service trips. Some of the service trips that our youth group has provided have been trips to Agua Prieta, Mexico, to Detroit, Michigan, and to Londonderry, which is in Northern Ireland. And on those mission trips, they do lots of different services, help people build homes, help with programs there, like youth group programs, just like ours, or, just service in whatever way they can with the communities there. The fourth fun fact is that most churches only recently have youth groups. So they didn't exist forever. They actually just recently, so the 1940s, discovered the need between when you receive your confirmation, which is becoming an adult in the church, usually happens around freshman year of high school, and between the years of that and when you start college, there was a huge gap of just not a lot of availability of people to have a program, or I guess people just didn't even think of it. And so youth groups only recently really started up in churches. Before that, there was things called Bible schools, stuff like that, but youth groups are pretty recent to churches. And a fifth fact is that youth groups often get involved in local services. So my youth group has been involved in the community food bank of New Jersey. We've done a thing called Mary's Meals, which provides meals for third world countries. We've done Habitat for Humanity, lots of different stuff, and we are able to have these experiences and go to different service outlets and really just help out the community in a wider spectrum than just, it doesn't have to be a Christian organization per se. It could be really just anyone, anywhere that they can serve and, do good in the world. So whether or not you've been a part of a youth group or if you've never heard of it before, I hope that this has been informational for you, and I hope that it's taught you a little bit about the microculture that is youth group working. Thanks.